Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you this, I was going to say bright sunny morning, but the sun's just gone in, so my mood's lifted a little bit. So it's Christmas is over, Kieran, so you can imagine what sort of mood I'm in. I would talk about the FA Cup, but I'm not going to talk about it until the third round's over, which will be in about 2.5 weeks' time. I'm not going to dig.
I'm still recovering from Brighton's first clean sheet in 9 months in the Premier League in a match which I think it's fair to say how Sky managed to get three minutes of highlights onto their clips reel is a hell of an achievement.
Well, it's the fact they have to show it again as well in full at some stage because of the broadcasting deal. It's like you do wonder who's going to sit down and watch that, basically, knowing that unless there's some bizarre whatever happened to the Lightly Lad scenario where someone has been away and doesn't know the score, says to the family, "Don't tell me what happened." Yes, and for those of you under the age of 60, that's a classic episode of a 1960s sitcom where two men try to avoid knowing the outcome of a game. I think Bulgaria versus England, I believe it was, because they're going to watch the highlights on TV later. It's very, very, very funny. And I won't do a spoiler alert in case there is one person going, "I've not watched that episode." It's questions day, Kieran, so should we we've already wasted 3.5 minutes by the look of things not talking about questions. So should we crack on?
Let's roll.
Oh, God, very good. That's why you're the groovy accountant. Our first question.
Become very groovy. I've become very groovy in the last 48 hours following the Nottingham Forest story.
Yes, which
lots of people getting very worked up about that.
Which went from club I can't name to Kieran Maguire says Nottingham Forest going into going bankrupt. Yes, groovy. Somebody said to me over Christmas when they were asking about how the pod started, and when I said producer guy phoned me up and said he knew this groovy accountant, and they said surely that should have set alarm bells ringing.
Yes.
He said, "I'll do a pod with a groovy accountant." Okay. David Fairhurst has our first question, and it's a really interesting one, Kieran. The PGMOL, says David Fairhurst, and the PGMOL, of course, are basically the referees company, so they supply referees for Premier League games. So David says the PGMOL is a private registered company at Companies House, and as far as I can see, it holds a monopoly on matchday officiating, with some admitted mistakes by officials costing clubs points and potentially relegation. Is it possible for clubs or supporters' trusts to sue the PGMOL? Surely they are not exempt from litigation. Now, interestingly, Kieran, when we were researching our last book, if you thought FIFA was like North Korea in trying to find stuff out, the PGMOL was the hardest organisation of all to research, especially in terms of how much referees were paid, what their basic rate is, what their bonuses are. The only thing we could discover is that there's a huge discrepancy between the pay of male referees and female referees, although that may have changed because we now have a female referee in the Premier League, but I suspect it hasn't. But I was astonished by the level of secrecy involved. So we don't know how much referees are paid. We can make a ballpark guess, but it's quite a lot of money for the FIFA registered officials. But this is an interesting. I suspect, Kieran, the short answer to this question is going to be no, isn't it?
No, it depends. I think we would have to go okay. Here, of course. And I absolutely agree with you. I contacted PGMO. I says, we've had asked the EFL, we've had asked the Scottish Premier League, and we've had asked Nick DeMarco and so on, and they've all been willing to come on and have a chat with us. And we said, look, we're on the side of referees. I used to referee football myself. We've had the referees charity on. We're on your side genuinely. And it was no, we just don't want to talk. And I find that bizarre, and I don't see the benefits from it. Is it possible for a club or a supporters trust to sue them? Well, it is physically possible, yes. Would I recommend it? Certainly not. And simply for this. First of all, what are you going to sue them for? The PGMOL, they appoint the referees. So, if somebody books you to do a gig, they're not responsible for your jokes.
No.
If he said, "Well, yeah, joke number 17," nobody laughed, and I go, "Well, we're going to sue." So if we're looking at the potential areas over which there could be litigation, could they be sued for negligence? Could they be, because let's say that a referee was not qualified to referee that match? So what we have to do, we have to look at three issues. Does PGMOL have a duty of care towards football clubs, towards football fans? See, I don't think it's got any duty of care towards football fans. So I think from a supporters' trust point of view, it would be a difficult one. Does it have a duty of care? Yes, it probably does, because it's been appointed, it's got a contract, and so on. Has there been a breach of that duty? Well, we all make mistakes in life. We all make mistakes at work. So if a referee makes an error in good faith, and I am very much of the view that referees give what they see, and I'm those people that make the accusations of vendettas, conspiracies, and so on. I think they are tinfoil hat wearers as far as I'm concerned. Referee might make a decision which, upon looking at it from 17 camera angles, actually looks like it was probably the wrong decision. But you give a decision in real time. VAR has reduced the number of errors. So has there been a breach of that? I think that would be very difficult to prove. And has there been loss suffered as a result of that breach? Well, I think that third issue you could prove if a club gets relegated. And we saw during COVID. Remember when I think it was Aston Villa
first
had
came
a
back,
goal
Sheffield
allowed?
Sheffield United, yeah.
And that was a failure of VAR, of the VAR cameras, to see a ball crossing or not crossing the line. And the club was relegated on the back of that. So there is historical evidence that incorrect decisions have resulted in clubs being relegated or promoted. Equally, you could say players have missed sitters, goalkeepers have dived over the ball. Wasn't there one where a goalkeeper in the Premier League on the final day of the season had an absolute mare, and there was lots of conspiracy theories about that at the time, and so on. So I think it would be foolhardy of a club to go down that particular route. The only reason why I think a club might choose to go down that is if you have an owner who is publicity hungry, says, we've been relegated, it's nothing to do with me, Gav, it's nothing to do with the manager or players, it's all down to the referees, I'm going to sue PGMOL. They might do it from the point of view of a publicity stunt. They would be advised, we really don't think this is going to get you very far. But if they then choose to not take that advice, they could go ahead, and I think they would almost certainly lose. You would have to prove that there was a knowing degree of incompetence by the referee. And we all disagree with referees' decisions, but we all make our own decisions in life. What's your favourite Teletubby, for example? And you make a decision based on your opinion there. What's your favourite music? Blah blah blah. So I just don't see how it could go ahead. And if it did, then where do PGML stand in terms of, are they insured for this? Yes, there's some form of insurance. Do the individual referees have insurance? No, they don't, but they're employed by PGML, so they should be covered by that. It all starts to get very messy. It's not been seen in other sports, so there is no precedent. So I think this is a classic pre-match or post-match pub discussion question. Yeah, which we, as we've always said, are the greatest. And I would imagine you're sitting there with your mates, cup pint. Yeah, why can't we go and sue the bastards?
Yeah. A number of things to unpack there, Kieran. First of all, Tinky Winky is the favourite but only because I knew the chap who used to play Tinky Winky until until the what we can only refer to as the incident, which I'm not at liberty to go into any further. Secondly, Kieran, as you know, I don't do jokes. I do routines that tear away at the savage face of humanity to reveal the truth underneath. Occasionally, jokes about Prince Andrew and the bucket of shit. I think Everton Wimbledon was a game I think you're thinking of way back when Hans Sagers, I believe, number of rickets. I think that there's two problems here. In the pro suing referees camp, I think people might say, well, if Sheffield United can try and sue West Ham for playing what seemed to be an unregistered player, or the whole Tevez incident, if other clubs can threaten to sue Everton, who got relegated, then why are referees exempt from that? I don't agree with it, but that's an argument. I think the biggest issue against David's question is Darren England included. I don't think there's any conspiracy for referees against my particular club. I get absolutely few, particularly with Darren England. We can't win when he's refereeing, it seems. But that's not because he's biased against us, because the problem is you have to accept that every referee refereeing at the Premier League level has been through years of training and testing and examining, and is clearly a good enough referee to be refereeing at the Premier League level. And I think the one thing we can all agree on in English football is that there is no level of corruption from referees. Referees, however much it looks to us like that is the case sometimes, and however angry we are in the Parsons Arms afterwards, you have to accept that referees are making their decisions on a basis of fair judgment. And I don't think any court in the land would actually disagree with that. But again, it comes back, every now and again we get the argument about whether a player who hurts another player on a football pitch, whether he can be sued in the same way that if he'd done it off the pitch. And it does seem strange that the rules are different on and off the pitch, but I can't see any situation where any court in the land would say, you've got a fair case that this referee's decision clearly cost you promotion or relegation. Even in a cup final, even Mark Clattenburg, who I've said before, admitted that the worst mistake he ever made in a game was in the 2016 FA Cup final, and it cost Palace a goal and potentially the FA Cup. But even I don't think he did that deliberately, and he's arguably the worst ref Palace ever had. Although other clubs, mainly in the top six, would say he was the best referee they ever had. But it's subjective, and you don't want to take that away from the game. And also, who's going to become a referee if they think there's the potential for them being sued for a decision that they've made? And then where does it stop? If the linesman doesn't put his flag up, we saw the incident, I think it's Burnley Man City, when the player got injured, when the linesman should have, you'd think it was so offside he should have put his flag up. Are you then able to sue that linesman or that assistant referee for not putting his flag up? Because the answer is no, because the rules are you don't do that. So it's a minefield, Kieran. And then there are one or two referees I'd like to see negotiate a minefield every now and again at 5-5 at Sellers Park. But there you go. On to safer matters, Kieran. Paul Watkinson, Happy New Year, Paul, says, I have a question about my local club, Oxford United. I'm worried now that I didn't say Happy New Year to David. Let's take it as a given to all our question answers that is Happy New Year. Paul's question is about Oxford United, and he says, our current home, the Kassam Stadium, is owned by, Mr. Kassam. Thank you for that, Paul. I like the well is the bit I like. That's very sweet. With proposals now published for a new stadium on a different site, do we know how the building of the new stadium will be funded and who will own it? It's a strange one, Kieran, isn't it? Because we remember that dreadful Manor Ground, and it got developed, but only developed on 3 sides. And no one ever knew whether that's because Mr. Kassam had run out of money or there was a planning permission error, but you just had this odd car park at one end and a really nice three-sided ground. So this is the fact that they're moving already is an intriguing one.
Yes, I think they've got a lease which expires in 2026. They've got 2.5 years unless they can renegotiate the lease. The new stadium is going to cost, I think it's 18,000 capacity. Oxford is an expensive area in terms of real estate. So first of all, you've got to find the land. I think there has been somebody, so it's called a triangle, something triangle. And the estimated cost is £100 million. And when I've read the stories, they've said it's going to be funded by, and I quote, the markets. Now, this is where I start to get a little bit concerned, because what I would refer to as the markets wouldn't touch a £100 million development in respect of a football club which is in the lower tiers. I think they're having a good season of English football. What interest rates would they be charging? I think if you're borrowing £100 million at 8%, well, Oxford United don't generate much more money than that over the course of a season. So is Mr. Kassam going to be able to put in some interest-free loans? Is it just going to be topped up? Is it going to be owned by a third party who then rent it out to Oxford United? All of this is uncertain. But if that is going to be the case, we'd have to go down the Dion Dublin route and say, well, what's the yield going to be for the landlord? And the landlord would be looking for a good yield. And again, you would be talking about a lot of money being charged in rent. West Ham only pay £3.5 million on a £700 million stadium. That's a yield of 0.5% for the LDCC, but not the best decision ever made by a local authority. I can't see a private sector landlord being willing to go down as low as that. So that's my cause for concern. And the clock is ticking with regards to the lease. Now, leases can be extended, of course. So it's a funny one, but it's going to be an expensive piece of work. If you talk to anybody in the construction industry, material costs have gone up, labour costs have gone up, transportation costs have gone up. It's a tough gig doing a big project like that.
And well done for making the phrase "looking for a good yield" sound like it came from a Carry On film. Looking for a good yield, sorry. I'm not sure when you say the markets can't afford that in Oxford, because the two Christmas markets, £9 for a mulled wine and £25 for a candle in the teacup, I think only needs a couple of good seasons, and they'd be paying for that ground non-stop. Now, our next question, Kieran, comes from somebody who would have had their New Year slightly earlier than us, and has had their Christmas come 11 and a half months earlier than the rest of us, because it's another question from Larkin Hogel, which begs the question we always ask is, where did he get those naked photographs of producer Guy? Because clearly there is some reason why Larkin Hogel simply just asks a question, everything gets dropped, and we answer it. They're always good questions from Larkin, I have to say.
Yes, absolutely.
And one day we will fly out on Bonza Airlines. We discovered recently that the owner of Bonza Airlines is actually a fan of the pod, Kieran, which is information to tuck away in the back pocket for when we do our Australian tour. Larkin Hogel's question is this, and it's a very interesting one given the different time zones in which we all live. Is it possible to price the effect of tournament location, i.e. time zones, on broadcast revenue? Last year's Women's World Cup final was played at 3 a.m. Los Angeles time, 6 a.m. New York time. And given the popularity of women's soccer in the US, it seems reasonable to assume that US broadcasters would pay one of the highest broadcast fees in the world. Would the location of the tournament hurt that broadcast deal?
Yes, it was hurt. I mean, if we take a look at the Women's World Cup, there was brinkmanship taking place. right up to the commencement of the tournament. And that was because the broadcasters were not willing to pay the minimum prices being demanded by FIFA. FIFA seemed completely oblivious of the fact that, from a broadcaster's point of view, it's a terrible thing to say, it's just another product. And there isn't a lot of, and will dedicated football fans be watching the matches at those time zones? Yes, they will. And I suspect for you or I, our first World Cup was probably the 1970 World Cup, and begging your mum and dad to be allowed to watch those first England games when they were taking place at midnight, and I was 7-8 years old, was a tough gig, but of course it has an impact upon the figures and therefore what the broadcasters are going to pay, because the casual viewer is not going to be wanting to watch the matches. They'll watch it on breakfast TV in terms of the highlights, and they're casual fans anyway, so they're not bothered about missing out on the joy of a 90 minutes football match. And we're back to West Ham versus Brighton on January the 2nd there.
That's really annoyed you. That
short supply.
You really have taken that personally, Kieran. That's a classic football fan. You've had so many games this season that you'd think, oh, that's a cracking game. And what's the one that sticks out? Oh, that 0-0. It's not even one of those 0-0s as well, because sometimes you can say, somebody will come in at 85 minutes and go, oh, 0-0. And you go, no, it's a good 0-0. It's cracking. Yeah. But that was just a 0-0. That is one of those games where you just, 75 minutes in, you just think, get the captains together. Just say, Brighton fans have got a long journey home back to South London, where most of them seem to live, it seems. I was like, I can't get on a bloody train these days without at least one Brighton fan being on it, going to or from work in central London. Anyway, our next question, although they're all...
Well, when the fourth official put up the 5 minutes injury time, both sets of fans booed because we just wanted to go home.
Well, also, I think even you watch it. I was back playing something on Switch by then, so I was reading Judi Dench's new book, which is brilliant. But you cast your eye and you think, where did they get 5 minutes from in that second half? It certainly wasn't added on time for excitement. Anyway, it's a valuable away point. Roy Keane was saying.
It was. We were down to the bare bones, as Harry Redknapp would have said. So it was a good point. And we kept a clean sheet for the first time in 9 months. So there are positives.
West Ham, boring. A lot of teams are going to be struggling, like West Ham in January, because so many Premier League teams have got really good African players at the heart of their side. We're all going to miss them. We're going to miss Jordan Ayew. I never thought I'd say that in my life. We're really going to miss Jordan Ayew. Good Lord, that's how bad things are. This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by Football 360 Pro Series, an online course in football business and finance which features our very own Kieran Maguire. If you want to develop serious knowledge within football business and finance, grow your network in the football industry, or you just need more than your usual 2 hours of Kieran every week, Football 360 Pro Series might be the solution for you. This 8-week course, starting on January the 17th, will feature a small class size, plus a combination of on-demand lessons and weekly industry expert-led workshops.
And indeed, the lineup of industry experts consists of former Premier League chief executives, esteemed football agents, the General Secretary of the newly formed Union of European Clubs, financial analysts with experiences at clubs like Aston Villa, Leicester, Fulham, Manchester City, Millwall and Barcelona. And also me. You'll learn everything from club financial statements to accounting for player transactions, navigating spending restrictions and conducting your own financial analysis. And even the word amortization might appear too.
Oh, and what's even better is that there's a special early bird discount for our Price of Football listeners. Use the code POF Early Bird, all in capital letters. That's POF Early Bird, all in capital letters, for a whopping £310 off. For more information, go to football360.online and select Pro Series. Our next question comes from Rose Lawrence. Now, very many apologies if I've mispronounced that, Rose. My resident in-house Welsh language name specialist is currently not available. So I'm guessing it's a Welsh name, and I'm guessing I've mispronounced it, and I apologise. But Rose's question is, had Tranmere Rovers not missed out on Europe in 1994, how much would the club have benefited financially at a minimum, bearing in mind they would have had a Wembley final and at least one European match? Now, I imagine there are some football fans listening to this game saying, come on, it's 1994, let it go. But as on a regular basis, Palace fans still discuss the fact that we were cheated out of Europe when we finished third in Division 1 and the UEFA panicked and let Liverpool back in instead of us into Europe. We're still going on about that. So I'm not surprised that Tranmere fans are still going on about missing out on Europe in 1994. So it's a good question, Kieran. But I suppose it's difficult to compare the money they lost then to how much that would be now.
Yes, the one European match, if I went back into the archives of UEFA, was probably worth around about 80,000 Swiss francs. So this is pre-Euro. So a sizable amount because of the nature of the TV deal and so on. So yeah, so worth having. For a Wembley final, again, if you split it, three ways in terms of overheads, and then the two teams, you'd have sold out. How much would ticket prices be? We're probably talking 100 grand. So that by the standards of Tranmere Rovers in terms of their finances, it would have made it would have been very beneficial to the club, and it would have been great to have Tranmere because. As somebody, I was at university in Manchester, 1980 to 83, and every weekend I'd watch a match, because it was so cheap to watch football in those days. So I'd go to Main Road, I'd go to Old Trafford, or go and watch Brighton if they weren't too far away as an away match. But Friday nights was Stockport, Rochdale, or Tranmere. I didn't have any friends at university, so it was either that. So I'd go to lower league because that's when they used to play the matches. So I've always had a bit of affection for Tranmere, as well as the fact that the Baroness used to do the half-time draw at Prenton Park because she lived on the Wirral. I
was just about to say that, Kieran. So is there any possibility that a 21-year-old Kieran Maguire would have spotted I guess he's much younger than you, Kieran. I'm not going to speculate, but let's say a teenage Baroness wheeling out. I was going to say wheeling out the balls, but I'm not going to say that either. But is it possible? Is it possible that the Baroness may have taken out the halftime tombola while you were there? Because that's quite a romantic story.
Could have, yeah. And then many years later, we eyes crossed once again, and we took things further.
Yeah, romantic story right up until the time you took her to Hartlepool on your first date. Did you answer that question, Kieran? I was distracted then by the Baroness wheeling on the... Yes, you did, yes.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did, actually.
Yes, 80,000 Swiss francs.
Before I started rambling.
Ethan Kirkpatrick has our next question. And Ethan says, do we know how much BT, or TNT as they are now, and Sky pay to show League One, Serie A and Bundesliga games compared to the amount they pay to show the Premier League?
They're very coy, but... I know that Sky were being asked to pay 18 million a year for the rights for La Liga. So I think it would have been certainly less for Ligue 1. Bundesliga, Sky have just renewed the deal. So I think we're probably talking somewhere in the region of 10 to 20 million pounds a year. Now, if we contextualise that with regards to what they're paying for the Premier League, Sky are paying around about 1.2 billion a year. So they're paying 1% of the amount that they pay for the Premier League rights. And you might say, well, that's not very much, but it's exactly the same in reverse. Do Spanish broadcasters pay for Premier League matches? Yes, but they don't pay very much because Spanish football fans are very proud domestic fans, and therefore they support Barcelona, Real, Atletico, Girona, and so on. So the broadcasters do pay for this, but they don't tend to pay a lot, and you quite often see some of the smaller broadcasters. So I think it was 11 Sports, who Andrea Radrizzani, who was connected with Leeds, owned Leeds for a while. He actually ended up with some of the European sports rights, was hoping to pick up a big audience on the back of that. But we have a limited amount of time to watch football. Even though our partners might say at times you spend too much time, we say we can't physically watch as many matches as perhaps we would like, and therefore you prioritise, and you tend to prioritise EFL, SPFL, and Premier League over some of the European leagues because it's local football. You've got skin in the game, even because the fact that you and I we are both very fond of football kits because we like the York City kit in the 1970s when it had the Y on it. It was made by Admiral. I've always liked York City, and it's sort of that irrational affection for clubs, which is part of the joy of the game.
Well, it's maroon as well. Any kit that's got maroon in it is just... But it wouldn't be called maroon now, would it? It'd be called Blood Sunset or something. But it's maroon with that white.
There is no such colour as maroon when you're colourblind.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kieran. That was insensitive.
No, there's not offended at all.
It's very...
my life's a very simple one when it comes to colours.
Fair point. My heart breaks, Kieran, because I love colour. And interesting, you mentioned Girona because I'm going out for a drink tomorrow night with an old friend of mine in Tooting, where he's from. He lives in Switzerland, but he went to Girona the other night to see them beat Atletico Madrid. Took his new wife there, which you'll approve of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he figured that he couldn't go straight to Tooting without some sort of little detour between Switzerland and Tooting. So he went to Spain. It's interesting how TNT and Sky Sport market the overseas leagues that they show, because they spend their whole time telling us that the Premier League is the best league in the world by far, the most exciting league, the best quality. Sky spend the rest of their time telling us that the Championship is the second best. And then they have to go, we've got Bundesliga games on. Well, you've just spent 2 weeks telling us their shit, so I'm not entirely sure I'm going to watch that, to be perfectly honest, just because they got big flags. Our next question, Kieran, comes from Tom Love. Great name. Tom says... A big fan of the podcast, thank you, Tom, and a bigger fan of the fact that my club, Bradford City, are rarely mentioned on the pod. Wait, I can't recall Bradford City being mentioned. I think we occasionally mention the incredible crowds that they get for the level that they're playing. I will occasionally mention their kit, which again is got claret and yellow. So that's a cracking. Yeah, one of the theories of the reason why they wear claret and yellow stripes is it back in the Victorian times. The claret was meant to represent what the directors drank, and the orange was meant to represent the beer, what the players drank. And like most, brilliant. It is, but like most theories about kits and nicknames, I suspect it's bollocks, to be perfectly honest. like the 9 theories about why West Brom are called the Baggies, all of which are total nonsense, except for one that's probably the real one. But Tom says, anyway, Bradford City's recent set of accounts were published on the club website on the 6th of April 2023. And I was wondering if you could summarise the difference between the latest figures and those from the disastrous 2018-19 season, which to my knowledge is one of high spending and a bottom place finish in League One. From the outside looking in, it seems the club have recovered well from the previous regime of Edin Rejic. Is that right?
Yes. In 2018-19, Bradford City lost around about £1.9 million. They didn't publish a profit and loss account, so I'm not able to do a breakdown of wages and amortization costs. But the fact that they were losing, 35, 40 grand a week for a club which does have an absolutely incredibly progressive and inclusive season ticket policy, and that's resulted. I think they're averaging 14,000. Well, they had 14,000 for the last.
It was 15.5, I think, last season.
So that's absolutely fantastic. As far as the 2022 accounts were concerned, those losses had been reduced by 80%. So they lost 300 grand. They've their ability to generate matchday income, I think, is good, and on the back of that helps merchandise sales, that helps catering sales, and so on. So they're still not making a profit, but the losses seem to be far more easy to absorb as far as the owners are concerned. And as you know, we are both asked at times, what about clubs that would be worth considering buying as an overseas investor? And I sometimes get to take that a little bit further, and without giving too many details away, Bradford is a club which regularly crops up in discussions, because people are saying, well, if they can get 15,000 in League One, League Two, then clearly they have got the capacity. They have, of course, got a history of getting as far as the Premier League, and it's a big urban conurbation. So it's a club with prospects to go further.
Bradford is a very proud city in its own right. It's very much not a suburb of the conurbation of Leeds, but I suspect that there are possibly some potential overseas owner who will look at the club and go, well, they can't compete with Leeds in that area for fans, but they obviously can, both for success because they've been in the Premier League, and for fans because, as you say, it's an object lesson in how the smaller club in a region can still compete and make themselves financially viable, despite having a giant just down the road.
Yeah, and again, we're both old enough to remember Bradford Park Avenue being part of the 92. So Bradford actually being able to be a city which is big enough to hold two clubs. So their finances are decent, not spectacular, but they have opportunities, in my view.
Okay, there's one thing I've learned in 4 years doing this pod, that decent, not spectacular, is something that most clubs would actually 100% aim for, wouldn't they? How's your week? Decent, not spectacular. Brilliant. Well done. Congratulations. Open the champagne. Our final question comes from Morgan Knock, who I'm guessing is Welsh, because that's a really brilliant Welsh name. But also, his question's about a Welsh team, Kieran. So, old Sherlock here.
Yes.
Old South London's answer to Sherlock Holmes, putting two and two together. And also, it's a story we covered in the book. It's a really interesting one, as it's certain angles that this I'm trying to think, the Venn diagram, that's the word I'm looking for, Kieran. The Venn diagram of this story is certainly the second one we've recorded back here, and it's fine. People will forgive us. Morgan Knott says, Colwyn Bay were promoted to the Welsh Premier League 4 years after switching from the English Pyramid. I imagine they had to dramatically reduce admission prices when moving from the Northern Premier League to Cymru North level, and player wages may have followed suit. Could you take a look into the finances around the decision to switch, and whether it's now looking like a sensible decision as they reach the top flight in Wales? Off the top of my head, Kieran, I remember their owner saying he wanted to move back to the Welsh Pyramid because it was costing him £100,000 a month more, I think, to be in the English Pyramid. But of course, the other issue is the FA of Wales not happy about them leaving in the first place, and not particularly happy about them coming back. So without going into that particular can of worms, can we just stick to the finance of this question, because it's a very interesting one, and I think their crowds are 3.5 times higher than the next biggest in the league they play in.
Yep. I wonder what the Welsh is for can of worms.
Do you know what? It sounds like it should be can of worms, but it's one of the. I'm not going to. It's my favourite word, and my friend Catherine, who listens to this, will do a nut because she hates me saying this, because my favourite Welsh word is the word for microwave, which is popty ping, which is I don't care how proud a Welsh person you are. It's very good. I used to love watching. There used to be a Welsh soap opera on lunchtimes midweek. Pobly Cum. That's not People of the Valley. So if you're occasionally off sick from school, you'd watch this. And it used to make me laugh because it was in Welsh, and every now and again they'd go, Concord. Okay, Concord's flying over there, is it? But it's a beautiful language, the language of the angels. We're not taking the mick.
Yes.
Catherine will be furious. But it is Popty Ping. It's a great. It's what a microwave
It's
does.
superb.
Yeah.
Yes. Looking at the accounts of Colwyn Bay Football Club Limited, they are a small company, so again, you can't go into granular detail. But things do seem to have improved. And if we take a look at the accounts for 2022, they've either made a £200,000 profit, or the owners have put money in and they made a profit, which combined comes to £200,000. So that is fantastic. And it's a club which clearly therefore has more resources than they did when they were in the English pyramid. They can now have more local derbies. They can have greater progression. There is the potential benefits in terms of UEFA participation and UEFA distributions as well. So from a financial point of view, this would appear to be a decision which has borne fruit, and they're doing very well. And I used to teach in North Wales, so I know Colwyn Bay quite well, and a few wild nights when I was out teaching accountants. It can get no more rock and roll than that, can it?
Remember, Kieran, what happens in Colwyn Bay stays in Colwyn Bay. You know the rules. It's interesting though. I know from visiting there. Sally was brought up in Llandudno, but also from talking to people from that club, as we have done recently. It may not occur to a lot of our listeners that there's so many fans of Liverpool and Everton up there. The North Wales clubs are not only competing with each other for fans; they're competing with those two, which are only 20, 30 odd miles away. So there's a huge contingent of those fans, which is always going to be an issue, isn't it? For we just talked about how Bradford deal with having Leeds down the road. Colwyn Bay are never going to be able to compete with Liverpool and Everton in terms of attracting new fans, you'd imagine. So it's a miracle that they do, and that's why they have to find other ways. And that leads us back to discussing about 4G pitches, because that's why we were talking to Llandudno. So it's a constant daily struggle for clubs in that league to try and make money when you're surrounded by those big dogs.
Yeah, and then it comes down to being a community hub, local pride, the fact that you can physically go and watch the teams, because those fans in North Wales, Goodison and Anfield are sold out every week because both clubs have got fantastic fan bases, and then there's cost issues on top of that. So I think it allows fans to develop that relationship, and football is all about relationships. That's why we go there.
Yeah, and if any angry Welsh listeners want to tweet us, can you do it in Welsh? Because by the time I've Google translated it, I'll have calmed down a little bit. Thank you to everyone who has donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com, and you can go to that same website, priceoffootball.com, to buy one of our books or to get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt. We'll be back on Thursday with our customary news pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you as always for the interactions. I think I've been thoroughly grilled and microwaved by Nottingham Forest fans. But to be fair, all of them have been very, very reasonable. I just wanted to know more information, and there isn't a huge amount of new information to depart, and that's always an issue. That social media in particular fills vacuums very, very quickly. Thank you for all the support for the show. It genuinely, we've had lots of people tweeting pictures of the book, and we thoroughly hope you enjoyed it. We had great fun putting it together as well. If you want to support the show, Patreon is clearly one vehicle that will get you ad free. If at certainly the top two tiers, but you can actually help us just by giving the show a review. Go onto the app, say whatever you want. We're not begging for 5 stars, but say whatever you want. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Sylvester Stallone and Andy Holt. And I would pay a fortune. I'd sign up for the Patreon special for that too. I watched the Sylvester Stallone documentary over Christmas, like many people do. You're flicking through, and he came across as a fascinating character. And as I think it's well known, we're very fond of Andy as well.
It's one of those rare occasions, Kieran, when I've interviewed both of those people.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I interviewed Sylvester Stallone for Match of the Day too, when Bill Kenwright did me an enormous favour, God rest his soul, when I was sent up. My editor said, Sylvester Stallone's going to Goodison Park, and I went, so? He said, well, we think it'll be a good story. I went, well, the bloke who was Rocky, 30 years? I don't think so. I don't think anyone will notice, will they? Cut to, I don't know what it was on the Richter scale, but the whole of both players on both teams applauding me onto the pitch at the start of the games. This is when there were rumours that he was going to buy into the whole ground just on their feet chanting the Rocky theme tune. It was a huge media circus. But Bill Kenwright had told Sylvester's people that I represented Match of the Day too, and was well known as a blue collar working class fan. So just before half time, I got a tap on the shoulder of these two huge blokes who beckoned. I got the only interview with Sylvester Stallone who was just the most interesting, tiny little fella, but he's just the most interesting, fascinating bloke. It was like one of the best 10 minutes of my life. And then you may remember some famous there's a shot of him taking his first ever sip of Bovril at the start of the second half, and it's too hot for him. You can YouTube it. You've put Sylvester Stallone tasting well. It's hilarious, and Andy didn't swear as much as Andy Holt did during the interview. And also, I'd say my favourite photograph that we got sent over Christmas was of a father and son who had given each other the book. So they unwrapped the book on Christmas Day, and I just wanted to see the look on their mother and wife's face. And, oh my God, they've both got the same present. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.